Hello and welcome everyone to our recording of the 103 Budgeting for EPR Fee session. The session is being recorded on February 12th, 2026, and information in this presentation is up to date as of February 2026. Okay, starting off with our legal disclaimer. This is a reminder that Circular Action Alliance is not an attorney nor law firm and does not provide legal advice or recommendations. Please do not take our advice as such. Information in this presentation is not substitute for the advice of an attorney. Please seek the advice of legal counsel as necessary. And our antitrust reminder. As with the nature of EPR, there are many competitors on the call, so please do not discuss any of the topics on the right. CAA will not discuss any of the topics on the right in order to comply with federal, state, and international antitrust or competition laws. As a reminder, this is the 103 Budgeting for EPR Fees session, and the session will focus on providing information on how EPR fees are set and information to support internal budgeting. This webinar is the third session in our three-part onboarding series. We also have our 101 onboarding session that focuses on providing an overview of EPR, CAA, and provides resources to help you determine if you should register with CAA. Additionally, we have our 102 that focuses on registration and agreements and dives deeper into discussing the Participant Producer Agreement, or PPA, and state addenda. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please email producer.support@circularaction.org. As for our agenda today, we will start out by discussing the national fee setting methodology, dive into the 2025 and 2026 EPR fees/due planning, discuss fee budgeting for Oregon 2025 and 2026, then discuss fee budgeting for Colorado 2026, talk about California early fees, and lastly, discuss vendor setup. As for our webinar goals, by the end of this recording, we hope that you understand what state programs have payments due and when, compare and contrast the national fee setting methodology, Oregon and Colorado methodologies, and early fee methodology for California. And lastly, learn the vendor setup step process and where to contact CAA if you need additional information. Okay, as a reminder, these are the steps in the producer journey. To start, producers begin their journey by registering with CAA. Once you've registered and signed the PPA, you'll receive access to our producer portal. The producer portal is where producers register for specific states they're obligated in and submit supply reports for states they are obligated in. As a reminder, producers cannot submit a supply report until the state addenda for the reporting state is signed. After companies submit a supply report, CAA will set a final fee schedule and invoice producers, at which time producers will pay and the program will begin in that state. The first reporting and fee payment deadlines were for the state of Oregon in 2025, with their reporting deadline being back on March 31st, 2025, and the program starting on July 1st, 2025. Invoices for the Oregon and Colorado 2026 program year were sent out starting in January 2026. Once the program begins, we anticipate companies to begin innovating in order to potentially gain bonuses from reduced base fees and/or eco-modulated bonuses that can be received based on actions companies are taking. Today, we are going to be focused on budgeting and fees in our discussion today, which is the final arrow in the producer journey. Okay, CAA has a national fee setting methodology that will be the basis for what fees are set in each state. Starting with the components of producer fees. So CAA has developed a national harmonized fee setting methodology to guide fee setting across states. Fee schedules for each state will vary due to state-specific requirements, differences in recycling infrastructure, and material supply quantities. CAA determines the total cost of operating a program in a state and allocates those costs for each material based on the cost to manage each material type, the total amount of each material type that is supplied into a state, and the commodity revenue for recycled material. We will discuss the difference between base fees and eco-modulated fee adjustments. Starting with base fees, so base fee rates are material specific and defined by cents per pound of material. The rates for each material type will be the same for each producer. There are four key components for developing the fee schedules. First is the total program cost, which is the cost of operating a program in a state based on each state's specific requirements, which could include the cost of managing all covered material in a system, costs associated with program administration, education and outreach, and market development, and other requirements. The second component is the cost to manage each material category. All materials will have different cost impacts based on their quantities, material properties, and ease of collecting and recycling. The third component is commodity revenue of each material category. Materials are credited the revenues they earn, which reduces their management costs. And lastly, the fourth component is the total tons of each material category supplied into a state. Now moving on to eco-modulation. Eco-modulation refers to the process where fee adjustments are applied for individual producers based on their actions or inactions to improve the environmental performance of their packaging. These monetary adjustments are typically applied in the form of incentives or bonuses or disincentives or malices on top of a producer's base fees for a particular material category. Each state has adopted different approaches to eco-modulation. For example, some states require incentivizing higher use of post-consumer recycled content, or PCR, or packaging that is designed for reuse or refill. Other states' approaches focuses on reducing material weight or redesigning a package to remove attributes that can be detrimental to recycling. CAA is working to harmonize eco-modulation factors across states where possible to provide clear signals to producers when they make packaging design decisions. Eco-modulation criteria and implementation details are included in each state's program plan. CAA has some guiding principles, which we'll cover in the next slide. CAA invests considerable efforts to allocate only the capital and operating costs associated with the collection, processing, and transportation of each material. This isolates materials that require more equipment and labor to separate into a marketable commodity for those that require less. CAA's goal is to allocate fees fairly across the system. A key component of CAA's fee setting methodology is its guiding principles. On the left, you will see 7 guiding principles for fee setting. Going down the line, we start with harmonization. In accordance with the mission of CAA, we look to harmonize where possible, and fees is no exception. Next is fairness. Fee rates for each material category are the same for all producers regardless of company size or sector. Fee schedules are informed by producer data, and each material will pay its fair share of system costs. Material-specific costs. This means that fee rates will reflect the burden a material places on the system. Commodity revenue. Some materials drive revenue in certain states, and we will account for that in our fee setting methodology. Next is eco-modulation. Eco-modulation refers to the process where fee adjustments are applied for individual producers based on their actions to improve the environmental performance of their packaging. Each state has adopted different approaches to eco-modulation, and CAA will incorporate those into the fee setting methodology. Responsible end markets. Part of EPR is ensuring responsible end markets are established and/or improved. The fees will account for those costs. And lastly, clarity. CAA looks to provide clear communication to our stakeholder community. Okay, now let's go ahead and walk through the variables in fee setting, moving from left to right in this visual. So first, starting at the top left, CAA does a needs assessment or some other study to determine the total system costs. Then from there, CAA allocates those system costs to each material type based on the burden the material places on the system. From there, CAA will then give a credit to those materials that have a commodity value in a particular state. CAA also includes additional costs based on other factors such as administrative costs, education costs, regulatory costs, and more. And then with all of that information, CA will allocate those costs across the total supply into that system. This is based on the data producers report. After producers report, CA is able to provide a fee rate back to our producers. Once base fees are set, then CA provides bonuses and maluses based on eco-modulation factors. Okay, moving on to program budgeting and the fee setting process. What makes up the program costs? Basically, everything you see here on the screen goes into making a program successful in accordance with the expectations of the regulators. This includes aspects of both collection, post-collection, regulatory costs, and administrative fees for the pro. Due to these various factors that make up program costs, fee schedules may not apply in the same way across states. There are various market and state-specific input differences, including the scope of each state program, the types and count of covered material included by each state, the expected performance standard by each state, the state-specific costs to manage each material type and material revenue, the maturity of the existing state's recycling system, the quantity of each material type supplied into the state, the quantity of each material supplied into the state by each producer, and then the eco-modulation structure and approach by each state. Okay, now we will dive into state-level eco-modulation comparisons. So starting with Oregon, producer fees will cover the cost of capital investments for service expansion and depot setup to service the residential stream, as well as the management of commercially generated B2B materials that end up being managed under the EPR program. Life cycle assessments, or LCAs, of the impact of packaging materials will be included as an eco-modulation factor in Oregon. Bonuses will be granted for conducting LCAs and showing impact reduction. Next, for California, producer fees will cover the net new costs of recycling services to California state residents, including capital investments to infrastructure and technology. Fees will also cover special assessments to support responsible end markets or REM development and source reduction initiatives. In California, eco-modulation is required across 9 factors, including the percentage of post-consumer recycled content, source reduction pathways to achieve source reduction goals, standardization of materials to simplify downstream management, labeling to improve consumer behavior related to sorting and proper disposal, actions taken by the producer to accelerate source reduction and to invest in sustained and robust refill and reuse systems, and plastic covered materials derived from renewable materials. And then lastly, here on the screen, we have Colorado. So producer dues will cover the net costs of recycling services to Colorado state residents, including capital investments required for service expansion, material collection, sortation, and processing, and improvements to compost facilities to increase the acceptance of compostable packaging. By 2028, the program will also cover recycling services for non-residential entities. In Colorado, eco-modulation is required across 8 factors. Some of these eco-modulation factors encourage incentivization for things like reduction in packaging, innovation and practices to enhance recyclability, high levels of post-consumer recycled material, designs for reuse and refill of covered material, and high recycled and refill rates of covered material. Additionally, these eco-modulation factors are required to discourage designs and practices that increase the costs of recycling, reusing, or composting covered materials, designs and practices that disrupt the recycling of other materials, and the use of covered materials that are not on the minimum recyclable list, or the MRL. The Colorado Department of Health and Environment will develop a bonus schedule for CAA to implement at the beginning of each year. Okay, moving on to the 2025 and 2026 EPR fees/due planning. So producers will pay annually for their EPR obligations, and understanding the following terms helps to illustrate what producer data is used to set fees that producers pay. Generally, the program year typically follows the data year by 2 years and the report date by 1 year. This timeline allows producers to gather, validate, and submit accurate data before fees and compliance obligations are set. For example, here at the bottom of the screen, we have Colorado. So in Colorado, producers reported on their 2024 data year and had a reporting deadline for their supply data on July 31st, 2025. This 2024 data was used to set fees and invoice producers in January 2026, which will support the 2026 program year. While there were a number of producer deadlines in 2025, there was only one payment due. Oregon's program officially started on July 1st, 2025. Producers who have submitted Oregon reports containing 2024 data have been invoiced for Oregon's 2025 program year. If you have not yet reported your 2024 Oregon data and are required to do so, you will be invoiced for Oregon's 2025 program year within a few weeks of submitting your late report. Okay, and this is an overview of our 2026 EPR fee and due schedule. So producers in Oregon and Colorado will pay material category fees for their 2026 program years in both states, and invoices for both Oregon and Colorado were sent out starting in January 2026. California's EPR law states explicitly that early fees be collected by the pro to fund pre-program costs, a unique feature of the law that differs from Oregon and Colorado that did not have pre-program costs. These early fees will be invoiced in August 2026 based on the data that is submitted to CAA by May 31st, 2025. Lastly, there's still some information pending for Maine, but we wanted to highlight that producers should expect startup fees in Q4 2026 after a Q3 simplified supply report in Maine. Okay, and with all of that, I will pass it over to Matt to discuss EPR fee budgeting for Oregon 2025 and 2026.
Great. Thanks, Savannah. Let's jump in to talk more about Oregon. The Oregon fees take into account three factors similar to the national fee setting methodology. Producer supply data plays a critical role in setting state-specific fees. The first factor is system costs. As outlined in CAA's Oregon program plan, CAA has an estimated budget for each program year through 2027. If you have the Oregon program plan open, which is available on our Oregon page of CAA's website, you can find the estimated budgets for the first 3 years of the program on page 299. CAA has conducted an evaluation of the Oregon recycling system, detailed in a project titled the Oregon Recycling System Optimization Project, that informs system costs. The second of the three factors is the number of producers. Producers continue to register with CAA in Oregon even after the program started last July. Late reports were included in 2025 fee setting through the end of April 2025 to include more producer reports and fee setting in an effort to minimize fee rates. 2026 fee rates incorporated late reporters through the summer of 2025, as well as approved adjustments and corrections on previously submitted reports. These all play an important part in the third key fee setting factor, which is supply data. The supply data is used to both set the category fee rates for all producers and calculate your company's individual fees. All producers pay the same fee rates, regardless if you report on time or submit a late report. For those that report and pay late, they may be subject to late fees and interest on top of paying their respective individual material fees. So, as Savannah overviewed, the 2025 and 2026 producer fee schedules are available right now. While CA's Oregon program plan was published with the estimated base fee rates on page 199, CA has announced the final fee rates in all 60 material categories and the flat fee tiers for both the 2025 and 2026 program years. These fee rate schedules were calculated using submitted producer 2024 supply report data for Oregon based on producer supply tons by material type to meet the 2025 and the 2026 Oregon program year budgets. As we mentioned earlier, or Savannah mentioned earlier, generally the program year follows the supply data year by 2 years. For the Oregon 2025 program year, however, this was not the case as 2024 data was used for calculations in the shortened first year of the program. CAA consulted with the Oregon regulator DEQ and received approval to use the 2024 data for calculations in both the 2025 program year and the 2026 program year. Without this arrangement, producers would have had to submit both 2023 supply data to fund the 2025 program year and 2024 supply data to fund the 2026 program. So as we've mentioned, billing for the 2026 program year is based off of the same 2024 supply data producers submitted during the Oregon reporting deadline earlier in 2025. The 2026 fees were allocated in accordance with the 2026 Oregon budget. The 2026 fee rates include late reporters in an effort to maximize submitted supply tons to minimize fee rates. While a single invoice is issued to producers for the 2026 program year, the 2026 program fees can be split into 2 equal payments, with a 50% payment due within the payment terms and a second half payment due by July 30th, 2026. We've tried to illustrate this using the table here in the center of this slide. So for Oregon 2025, which covered the July through December 2025 program year, that was using the 2024 data from the March 31, 2025 deadline. The payment date for that was mid-year of 2025. And in this example, we have the total EPR fees for the 2025 program year totaling $100. Now for the 2026 program year, we have the total amount owed as $140, but producers are able to split that up into 2 payments. So the first being due within the payment terms of the invoice issued in January 2026, and the second half due by July 30th, 2026. Now, looking ahead, producers will report their calendar year 2025 data to CAA by May 31st, 2026, and this data will be used to set the fee rates for the 2027 program year. So continuing on with the 2-year lag between the program year and the data year. For producers who have submitted an Oregon report, as mentioned, 2025 invoicing was completed last June, and 2026 invoicing was recently completed in January of 2026. For producers who submit late reports, moving forward, your invoice should be issued within 3 to 6 weeks of submitting your report. If more than that amount of time has gone by and you still have not received your invoice, you're welcome to reach out to CAA directly at producer.support@circularaction.org. Under definitions on this slide, I'd like to highlight 2 change scenarios for submitted reports. The first is a correction, which is a change to a producer report required by CAA because of its ongoing report validation or because of an independent audit. Producers will receive a correction letter and will have 60 days to respond. The second change scenario to highlight is an adjustment. An adjustment is a change to an already submitted report initiated by a participant producer. After a producer hits submit on their report in the producer portal, they are unable to edit their report data and must follow the adjustments process. So here we do have more information on the adjustments process. The adjustment request Excel spreadsheet details everything that is needed to submit your request into the producer portal via the Help and Support tab. You can find the adjustment form in the producer portal, in the adjustment request article viewable in the useful links section of the homepage. The adjustment submission instructions are outlined in the middle of this slide. And if the adjustment is validated, it will impact any previously approved eco-modulation reports. Any validated adjustments will result in either an additional invoice or a future credit. Producers are only allowed one adjustment request for a submitted report. The adjustment request must include all changes required to your report and an explanation for the change. While this slide is specific to Oregon, Colorado adjustments follow a very similar process, with the main difference being a Colorado-specific adjustment Excel spreadsheet. Now moving on to Colorado. A detailed estimated fee schedule, or dues, as they're referred to in Colorado, was published in CAA's Colorado Program Plan that is available for download on the Colorado page of CAA's website. These estimates can be found starting on page 190 of the Colorado Program Plan for initial budgeting purposes. The estimated dues in the Colorado Program Plan are listed by aggregated material category, as opposed to the specific material category like they are listed in Oregon's program plan. Colorado's program plan estimated dues include a low, medium, and a high scenario. On the far right-hand side of this slide, you can see that there is also a minimum and a maximum range of individual material category dues. The estimated dues in this slide in the Colorado program plan cover 2026 through 2030 and can be used for initial budgeting purposes. CAA does publish a unique due schedule each year with the actual due rates for each material category. Colorado dues are impacted by eco-modulation factors in the form of incentives and malices that are used to adjust producer base dues with the aim of influencing producer product and packaging design choices. Built into the Colorado due schedule are passive eco-modulation factors. These passive factors are applied at the material category level and therefore apply to all producers supplying cover materials in a category for which the passive factor applies to. The table you see shows some of the bonus and malus factors. The detriments malus applies to cover materials that increase the cost of recycling, reusing, or composting cover materials, that would be malus A, and whose material designs and practices disrupt the recycling of other materials, that would be malus B. The other malus is intended to discourage producers from using cover materials that are not on the minimum recyclable list, or MRL, which are cover materials that are readily recyclable. A bonus is applied to material categories that have a high recycling rate of cover materials. Beyond the passive eco-modulation factors outlined on the last slide, there are also other incentive factors that will be available for the Colorado program. CAA has released guidance on eco-modulation for Colorado ahead of the next Colorado reporting deadline at the end of May in 2026, when producers will report their calendar year 2025 data to CAA. For reference, the incentives and malices are listed in this table. And as we've mentioned, the Colorado due schedule for 2026 has been published, and producers have been invoiced for their 2024 supply data submitted during the Colorado reporting deadline that was July 31st, 2025. To highlight on the bottom bullet here, the Colorado 2026 billing schedule is the same as Oregon's, where producers were invoiced in January of 2026, with half of the balance invoiced in January 2026 being due within the payment terms on the invoice, and the second half of the balance is due by July 30th, 2026. Again, for Colorado, if you do submit a late report, you will be invoiced generally within 3 to 6 weeks after submitting your late material supply report. Great. Now let's move on to talk about California early fees. California's EPR law requires the Producer Responsibility Organization, or PRO, that's CAA, to set and charge fees during the preparation of the plan. Early fee rates will be charged based on the aggregate supply data of each material class level based on the 2025 supply data reported by California producers to CAA by May 31st, 2026. The simplified methodology was informed by consultation on both the Minnesota Interim State Addendum Consultation Survey and the consultation survey for the California Interim State Addendum, where producer feedback did directly shape these methodology changes for early fees in California. So a little bit more on the early fee methodology here. So CA will use the 7 material classes on the right-hand side to set the early fees in California. These material classes do map to the 95 cover material categories in California. And as I mentioned in the last slide, the SB 54 does require the PRO to determine a fee schedule during the preparation of the plan, which includes the cost to reimburse the department, the needs assessment, cost to implement the plan, and operating costs. CA has published California early fee range estimates in the producer portal. And as I just mentioned, there are early fee range estimates on the producer portal. And as a last reminder, final early fee amounts will be invoiced based on the 2025 supply data reported by California producers by May 31st, 2026. Lastly, we'll discuss CA vendor setup. CA's vendor information is available for billing setup, and producers should configure CA as a vendor in their system to prepare to receive invoices from CAA. If you are an individual with credentials or username to CA's producer portal, you can find our vendor information available in the producer portal under the CAA vendor information article. We do have our W-9 linked in the vendor setup article in the producer portal if you do require that to get CAA set up as a vendor. And we do ask that producers confirm vendor setup if possible with CAA once completed. There is a confirmation form. There's a link to that in the producer portal article. On that form, you can add a PO number if it is required on CAA's invoice for processing, and only PO numbers submitted in the confirmation survey will be added to CAA invoices. If you do have questions about making payments to CAA, you're welcome to reach out to our accounts receivable department at ar@circularaction.org. Important to note that invoices are sent from the email address circularactionalliance@myworkday.com. So we recommend that producers, to avoid any delays in receiving invoices, that they contact their IT security team and request that inbound traffic from this email address be whitelisted. By default, invoices are sent only to the primary contact listed on your account. If you have previously completed the vendor setup confirmation survey, which I discussed in the last slide, or have provided a unique billing contact to CAA, they will also receive a copy of the invoices. And lastly, CAA does have a producer payment portal to allow for easy payment via credit card or ACH payment methods. To get started, producers will need both their customer ID and the invoice number, which can both be found on the actual invoice. So you're welcome to scan this QR code. There's a link there. Otherwise, we do have this linked in the producer portal. Great, that concludes the content for today's 103 webinar. We greatly appreciate your time. We hope that you do stay engaged with CAA. If you have not done so already, you have watched this video and you believe you are an obligated producer, but your company has not yet registered with CAA, we highly encourage you to submit our initial registration form available on CAA's website. The Producer Resource Center is a great place to learn more about who and what is covered under state EPR programs, so certainly recommend checking that page out. We also have a monthly newsletter that anyone can subscribe to get the latest updates for each state and be notified of new resources. You're welcome to get in contact with us at producer.support@circularaction.org. And this is the third of 3 onboarding series that we do have, the 101, 102, 103. If you've skipped the 101 or 102, you're more than welcome to go back and watch a previous recording of either of those. We do have links on the Producer Resource Center. Otherwise, if you are a registered producer, CA does host a number of more advanced webinars where we dive deeper into portal navigation, into state reporting, and other state updates in our 200, our 300, and our 400 series. So you're welcome to either scan the QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide or visit our website and go to our events page to sign up for an upcoming webinar. Thank you so much for watching this webinar, and we hope to see you or hear from you again in the future.